Today, I would like to do a speech of the Rebbe, speech of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it's written in Likuti Sichot, Chelik, what is it, Lamed Gimel? Lamed Gimel, is it, or Lamed Vav? One second, let me have a look over here. Here it is. It is in Lamed Gimel, right? It's in Chelik Lamed Gimel of Likuti Sichot, of the 33rd book of the Rebbe's speeches. There's like 40, what is it, 42 now, I think, of the Rebbe's speeches. And this was said, when was it said? It was said in 1975. Okay. The reason I'm doing this is because it talks about the 21 days beginning from today, which is a fast day, Zion Tavis, until Tisha B'Av, which is when the temple was destroyed. It took more than, Tisha B'Av was when they broke through the walls and they destroyed the temple. It wasn't really in that short of a time, 21 days. And it happened, I think it was over a year, 2 years, whatever, until they actually went in. But however it is, the date that they broke through the walls was in Zion Tammuz, the 7th day of Tammuz, and a little bit more than a month, the date, a month later, Tisha B'Av, Yud Zion Tammuz. And 3 weeks later, on Tisha B'Av, is when the temple was destroyed. The first temple and also the second temple was destroyed. So that's 21 days. So those 21 days begin today. So this is a speech of the Rebbe about what those 21 days are. Now, it's certainly no secret that the Jewish people have suffered a lot of tragedies as a nation, national tragedies. I don't know if there's ever been, I'm not a historian, but if there's ever been a nation that has suffered so many tragedies. I mean, there certainly were, nations that were conquered by other nations and they suffered terribly and things like this. Maybe the Gypsies and those other people, but the Jewish people, they have their country, their homeland, and they were driven from it. They came back, and they were driven again, and they came back, and they were expelled from all these different nations officially. As a nation, they were expelled, like from Spain, from England. They were expelled from Portugal and from Italy and from anyway, and all these places they had pogroms all the time in Russia and Ukraine, especially where Ukraine was awful. But as a nation, just because they were Jews. In some ways, the worst of all of these was the destruction of the temple. Worse than even the Holocaust we have now. I'm not trying to minimize the Holocaust, but as incomprehensibly cruel and evil and destructive the Holocaust was, that 6 million Jews got killed only because they were Jews. I mean, the Nazis, they went into forests looking for old Jews and killed young Jews and just killing Jews. They made all these laws against the Jews and Jews. That was really terrible. But the destruction of the temples was worse. First of all, it could be that a greater percentage of the Jewish nation was killed. The first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, and the second temple was destroyed like almost 500 years later by the Romans. And that was almost 2,000 years ago. Now we're in what's called the exile of Rome. Gullus Romi. God willing, that the church will fall down with Rome, and that's one of the signs that the future redemption is here. But meanwhile, we're in a terrible, terrible exile. And this whole business is signified, the destruction of the first and the second temples, by these 21 days. From the 17th day of Tammuz until 21 days later, Tisha B'Av, when the temple was destroyed. Now, in Judaism, we say that everything that happens has a good message. Everything that happens is a good message, and everything that happens comes from God, and God is good, pure good. So, of course, we can ask ourselves the question, what's going on here? How could God be good? Okay, he wants to punish us a day, a week. The 21 days we're suffering, and we're suffering already for 2,000 years. Let me just close the thing. You won't mind?
Yeah. He said good morning.
What? 1 second. I'm sorry. I just muted you. Ask to unmute. I have to ask you to unmute. All right. I'm sorry, Abba. I muted you. Oh, here, go on. You wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, he said that the Dove said good morning to you.
Oh,
Good morning, Rabbi. Sorry to disturb. I apologize.
Oh, well, that's okay. That's okay. And I apologize also that I didn't hear you say good morning. And now I'm making up for it. I'm saying, please, if you can minimize or eliminate the background noise. I think it was Abba that made the background noise, but let's not have the background. Okay, let's go. So here we go. So the second temple was destroyed almost 2,000 years ago, and the Jewish people have been suffering ever since. What possible good could there be from that? I mean, it seems to be a bit, exaggerated. Okay, so the Jews didn't do what they were supposed to do. They worshipped foreign gods and they did bad things. Okay, so you punish them for a year, 2 years. What's 2,000-year punishment? What, right? 2,000. Stand in the corner. 2,000 years. Go ahead, right? Interrupted in class. 2,000 years going punishment. What type of a thing is that? Okay, let's see. Omer Azal, the rabbis say, the rabbis say, Shiamei Bein HaMetzarim, that these days, which are what's called Bein HaMetzarim. Metzarim means the difficult, the tragedies. Metzar is the tragedies. Between these two tragedies of the breaking in of the walls of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, between these two Nirmazu, these 21 days are hinted at in what is written in the Mashinama, what is written in the Nevuah, the prophecy of Jeremiah. Now, Jeremiah, if you look at Jeremiah, the story of Jeremiah a little bit, it was a tremendously, incredibly tragic story. That he was, when the second temple was destroyed, he was trying to go around and tell everybody, it's not too late, you can fix yourself up. Nobody wanted to listen to him. And he was almost killed several times, and etc. Okay. Jeremiah, Odo, regarding the Churban, the destruction of the first temple and the exile of Babel. I'm sorry. Jeremiah was the first temple. I'm sorry. Jeremiah was the first temple. All the prophets were in the first temple. In the beginning of the second temple, there were the people of the Great Assembly, and then part of the people of the Great Assembly were the last three official prophets of Haggai, Malachi, and Zechariah. Okay, but Jeremiah was right at the end of the first temple. Sorry. And this is what Jeremiah said. He said, Makel Shaked Ani Ro'eh. He said, he's prophesying the destruction of the temple. I see a almond stick. Hashaked is this almond, Mishat Chanito, and it said that's the end of that's the end of the prophecy. That's the end of what we're concerned with. So this, why a almond? It says because this almond, Mishat Chanito, from the time that it starts to bud, Ad Gomer Bishulo, until it finishes, Esrim V'echad Yom, it's 21 days. Kaminyan Yomim, like the number of days Shabain, which are between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th day of Tammuz, when the city was broken into, and Tisha B'Av, when the temple was destroyed. The Pashto simply, Mashvat implies, the Zeh Shezman HaGolos at the time of exile was She Kadim Haya Hayu Yeshkedim Shezman again. The Pashtus simply Mashmat is implied. The Zman, the Zeh Shezman Gidol Ashkedim, that the time that it takes for almonds to grow, Romez is hinted at. The Zaman Bein HaMetzorim hints at the exact same number of days of mourning, these 3 weeks of mourning, who Rak Mipanei is only because Sheshneim Shavim, that they are equal in number. Both of them have 21, and there's all sorts of numerical Kabbalistic hints at the Gematria 21. Says the Rebbe, but that's not what we're interested in. Here we're interested in something a little bit different. Of Alpia Yadua, but it's not Shekoli in Torah, that everything that's in the Torah, are very, very exact. So Mistaber Lomar, it's logical to say Sheyesh Gam, that there is also Kshur Pnimi Beneim, there's an internal connection between them. So in other words, let us not ignore what the Torah says, and exactly opposite. Let's sort of ignore what the world says. The world is just sending us little hints, and the Torah is explaining what these mean. So the fact that it was 21 days, that's what the world is sending us the hint. What does the Torah say about this? If it's in the Torah, it must have something, an important message. Yesh le'bo'er that we can explain this according to what the Mishnah says. Sheyesh shnei minei shkedim. There's two types of almonds. The two types of almonds. It's a Mishnah and Maisrus. Mishnah. It says that there's two types of almonds. There's almonds which start off bitter and end up being sweet. And there's almonds that start off being sweet and they end up bitter. Here, let's see. Yesh shkedim marin, there's bitter almonds and there's sweet almonds. Sweet almonds. The almonds that are bitter, haim, metukim, they are sweet when they are small. But there's a lot of fruits that when they're small, they're sweet, and when they get older, they're bitter. The example is lettuce. Lettuce, when it starts off, it's sweet, but if you let it grow for a while, it becomes bitter to the point where it's used as moror. That's the ideal moror in the Pesach Seder, is lettuce. So it starts off sweet, and it ends up bitter. V'nasim marim, and they end up bitter. B'shkedim. Then there's also that what it says in the Mishnah that there's sweet almonds. These are almonds that now they're sweet, but when they began b'katnusam, when they were small, they began being bitter. And afterwards, kagomer b'shulam, when they ended up, that they were sweet. It's explained in a book which is called Safnat Paneach, which is written by the Rogachover Gaon, Rabbi Yosef Ruzhin, that he was a tremendous genius and he knew everything in the Torah just by heart. So he explains that Iker Shem Shkedim, that when the name Shkedim, almonds, is used, it is al GEULA mutuka. This is ones that were bitter and now they're sweet. The Elishib Gatat Nusam, and those which were sweet when they were young, they're called luzima. So there's two different names. If you break it down, the general name is almonds, shkedim. But if you really break it down, there's luzim. Those are almonds which presently are bitter. When they're old, they're bitter. But when they were small, they were sweet. That's called luzim. And when the word shkedim is used, like it is over here in the prophecy of Jeremiah, so he said shkedim, those were almonds that were bitter in the beginning, but 21 days later they become sweet. The nimsa, so comes out that the whole meaning, the nature of the shaked, the word shaked, upu'ulat kaf aleph yom bishula shalom, a shaked is hafuch, is exactly the opposite. Mimar lamatok. Now the word, it started off bitter and it ends up sweet. Okay, so the word shaked, so here we see really the word shaked has three meanings to it, maybe even more. The word shaked means almonds that presently are sweet, but they began to be bitter. The word shaked means to be quick. And the word shaked means to be constant. Constant. In other words, that you work on something. Shkida means that you work constantly on a thing. So these, okay, how are these all fit in together? Yesh Lomer, we can say, what's sweet about the 21 days of mourning? We'll see. Yesh Lomer, we can see, Shemitamza, therefore, Nimras, therefore, it's hinted at in Jeremiah, these 21 days, a makal shaked, with a staff from which are almonds, ki tochen avodas yamim elu, because the whole content and theme of these days is lo rak levatel et inyan, not just to negate something bad, the bitterness. In other words, we have 21 days of mourning and they end. That's a good thing that they end. Says that's not it. Something even more. Shaked indicates that Odzo, the Aliyah Lashon Rambam, like the Rambam says, Benogea, regarding to Yamei, the days of Hatzomot, the fasts, which are going to be the day. It says Lahafcham, that they will be transformed, the Yomim Tovim, to holidays. The Yamei Sasan v'Simcha, and days of joy and happiness. Shetamuratam, and rewrote that in the place of being bitter, Yahavchu Yomim Metukim Usmechim, sweet and happy. Huh? That's what's going to be. This is in the prophecy. We go, where is it? It says over there, where is it? All right. Jeremiah. It's also in Pasuk in Jeremiah. Right. So these, okay, so these fast days are going to transform to be holidays. Shkedim L'tov. It says, Al Pizeh, according to this, Yom Tov, now we can understand that Yud, this prophecy of Jeremiah, V'hoya kasher shekadati, God says, just as I was, how do you say, constant and quick, aleim lintosh, to, so to speak, to abandon you, kain ashakod, I will, the printing is a little bit sort of unclear, so that's why I'm making mistakes, and my eyes are also my problem, so I don't know which one is the real problem, me or the thing, but in any case, it's a little bit hard to read. Cain also ashakod aleim libnot, I just as I was a constant and how do you call it, and interested to leave you, and I did it quickly, so I will also build you up, God said. She'inyan shaked, this whole idea of shaked, that God is constant and that he's how do you say, serious, constantly. As atzmo is lehepech min hakatzeh el hakatzeh. It means that, what does it mean? That God is going to transform things, not just stop the problems. It'll be from the opposite to the opposite. To tamur tashkida. That instead of God being very, very, how do you say, enthusiastic, or shkida is also means enthusiastic, to do the opposite of bad, that at the beginning of the prophecy of Jeremiah, nasa shkeda, it will be for good. But listen, this is generally a big topic of the prophets. They start off really bad, and the enemies of Judaism always like to bring those sentences to prove that God left the Jews. But they it's like, like the fake news. They just say the beginning of the thing, or the end. They say what. But the fact of the matter is that the prophecies they always start off very, very, severely, and because the Jews, they really let God down. God expected a lot from the Jews, and they let them down. They just wanted to be normal like everybody else. God said, you can't do it. So it starts off very bitter, but in the end, it always comes out good, right? You can ask a question, how can it come out good? God is infinite. His anger is infinite. So how can it stop? So the answer is God is infinite. His anger is infinite, but his mercy and his love is even more infinite, even more. The reason that God is so angry is because he loves us so much. He expects so much from us. Okay, so what the Rebbe is trying to say is that these 21 days of tragedy, which, I mean, we've sort of forgotten the immensity of the tragedy because we've gotten used to it. Like people grow up in imprisonment. There's, what is it called? There's the Amsterdam, something like that complex. I think Amsterdam complex. These people, they kidnapped somebody. They kidnapped criminals. It's a real thing that happened. I think it's called the Amsterdam complex or something like that. They kidnapped someone. This was like, I don't know, 50 years ago. They kidnapped person. They kidnapped them, and the person, a normal, regular person from the streets, they kidnapped them and held them for ransom. I guess nobody wanted a ransom. And this person became a criminal. He identified with his captors. He identified with them. And at first they did all sorts of terrible things. And then he participated participated in bank robberies and all these things. It's the same thing. The Jewish people have been 2,000 years in captivity. So we're sort of identifying with, it's a psychological weakness that people have. We're identifying with it. Says the Rebbe, the goal is not to stop our imprisonment. The goal is not to be free from exile. The goal is to transform it, to be free to actually serve the creator of the universe, to do something truly meaningful, to be partners in the creation. According to this, so Yesh Labir, now we can explain another detail of this prophecy of Jeremiah. Rome, as it's hinted at, and the days between these Bein HaMetzurim, says it's called a Makel Shaked. It is a staff of almas. Who mitchonas amehirus begidol apri. The main thing is the fruit. The fruit grows up quickly. It says it's the fastest ripening fruit. And God said, just like I was quick to bring the destruction on the Jews, I'm going to be quick to transform the whole thing, just like the almonds transform from bitter to sweet. So what do you have to have a stick for? We have to understand why was it a staff of almonds? He showed a staff from a tree that they grow almonds from it. He could have just shown them almonds or shown them like one little branch or something. He could have just shown that the staff was below olim or below prachim. It was a staff, not like the staff of Aaron we had before. It was without any leaves and without any fruits, without any flowers. Below anaf sheish alav shkedim. He didn't show like a little branch or something. He showed a whole staff. Why a staff? And on it are just almonds. If you're going to do it, at least show it like Aaron did. Remember, we had a whole explanation that nature itself it can be made holy. Here he shows just a staff with almonds. The Cheora, at first glance, Yeshlomo, we can say, Shebezen Nirmas, this is hinted at another thing. Okay, so the staff seems to be not really part of the prophecy. But on the other hand, it was there, it was in the prophecy, and it didn't have to be there. He could have just shown them almonds. Why did he show them a staff? A staff shows on Haka. It shows on punishment. Ha'oneshim or paraniot. A punishment and what do you want to call it? The almost vindictive, right? Paraniot, repayment, vengeance. She'evia Kodesh Baruch Hu, that God brings on the Jews in these days. But at first glance, so that's what a staff is. A staff is showing that God is punishing us. He's hitting us with the staff. But at first glance, this is not a good explanation. Maybe that's why it's a staff, because these are days of punishment. Says Rebbe, that's not a good explanation. Why? Shahari Ikra Navua, the main prophecy over here of Jeremiah is Allah Shkeda, is on the quickness, on the Shkedim, on the quickness that God does. He didn't have to show a staff at all. We know that we're suffering. God is trying to say that just like I was shoked, that I was quick to punish you, so I'll be quick also to relieve you and to transform the whole thing. What does he have to bring a staff for? Staff just shows on the negative side. It says, it doesn't, in the sense, it doesn't talk anything about how God is punishing. It's just after it starts talking about the almonds, so it's God said, I'm going to make everything quick. I'll transform bitterness to sweetness, and I'll make it quick, and they won't have to wait. It's going to be quicker than you can imagine. It's only going to be all good. And that's why there's a staff. Says the Rebbe, what's a staff? A staff is just punishment, just showing on what was Imkain. If so, a difa would have been the Ramez, and the Shkida, both in Brur. Why not make it just clear? Just the fruits. Ali the Urias Priya, just show them the fruits. Or at least maybe a couple of flowers and fruits. Almond flowers are very beautiful. They're very fragrant also, white flowers. So show that. Show the good thing. That's what the prophecy is about the good. Why a staff? Why confuse this hint at the goodness of God that's going to be quick by showing a staff of almonds? Until that Jeremiah had to yitbonen, he had to, it said that he had to contemplate on this staff until he recognized that what type of a staff is it? God showed him, oh, I see, it is a almond staff. So it doesn't even say really that he showed him almonds. It just said that God showed Jeremiah in his vision a staff from an almond tree. So that seems to be almost exactly the opposite. He had to think about the staff and realize it's from almonds. And then the prophecy is about almonds. Show him almonds. According to what we said before, but tochen in a sheked, this whole idea of what is a almond, shatam, that the reason that he showed a staff, davka, is because he's hinting at shebeshkedim, that this whole idea of almonds transforming from bitter to sweet, somehow or other, this is not just relevant to the almonds, This is relevant to the staff itself, to the punishment itself. Let's see. Hasbarsini, let's explain. Mavur b'kama makomos, we've explained many times. Being in Shnei Hashemos, the two names the Jewish people are called. sometimes, sometimes the 12 tribes are called Shvatim, and sometimes the 12 tribes are called Matot. Mateh also means like a tribe, a group. Mateh, and a Shevet is also a tribe, a group. Have the difference when calling Jews a Shevet or a Mateh. But Pashtus, that's going to be next week's Torah portion. Matot v'maseh. Matot means the tribes of the Jews, and Maseh means journeys. Okay, and the Rebbe is going to talk about that at the end. I hope we get to it. Simply means that a shevet is the word shevet means a soft branch. Sheish bo adayin lachluchis, it's still fresh. Mianikas elan, and it was attached to the tree. How much more so when it is actually attached to the tree, which is not the case of mateh, a staff. A staff is something that's hard. That's why Jews for punishment. It's hard and it's separated from the tree. But a kavan nityabesh, and it already got dried up. Avaldavka mishum zeh, because of this, therefore the shevet, which is soft, nase kashe, it becomes afterwards hard, and it becomes a mateh. Right? A shevet is when it's still attached to the tree. You can bend it. You take it off of the tree, and it becomes hard and unyielding. Then you can punish with it with a mateh. But Dargot Avoda, regarding to what can we learn this for serving God? Shevet shows on the Jewish people. The Jewish people are sometimes called Shvatim, and sometimes they're called Matot. Shevet, which is soft, this hints at the Jewish people when they are in a good situation. They're joined to the tree. They're joined to God. Shebechlalut in general, this is the time that the Holy Temple was standing. Ubnei Israel, the Jewish people were in Israel. Ba'anu yochalim, and we are able, la'alos, to go up and to see and to bow down in front of God. As then, Nirgash Israel, the Jewish people could feel Hachibur l'makorom, the connection to their source, to the creator of the universe. Ilana, the upper, what's called the tree of life. Which is not case mateh, the word mateh, more, this indicates Al-an matzavam shel Yisrael, the Jewish people, when they are in exile. Shalom nikar, that it is not recognized as then, begilu, in a revealed way, chiburim, their connection to God. We don't see any signs. We don't see any signs, any miracles. Who says God exists? She'ein reyas elokis, we don't see any godliness, not like in the time of the temple. Until sheyesh helamas v'sterim, now there's all sorts of concealments and difficulties and opposition, alavoda, so minirti kuvim, preventions, obstacles from within and from without. Doubts, frustration, confusion. What's a Jew? What is God? If God is is there such a thing as a Jew? Is there such a thing as God? Specifically in this, Midkala Tokfo Shel Ish Israel is revealed the power of the Jewish people. Shemidgaber al Kolam and Nius V'Kuvim, that they overpower all of the difficulties. Velochem, and they war imamenagdim menatzchim umenatzchem. They can fight against the difficulties, including the difficulties within, and conquer them. Again, until it comes to Shlemos Avoda, to the completion of service. Shemapech at the Mar, you can transform the bad to good. The bad, the evil, the difficulty of Gullus to the sweetness of GEULA, of redemption. According to this, Yesh Lomar, we can say that the hint at the Makel, Shebenevuas Yirmiyah, which is in the prophecy of Jeremiah, is that the tokef, that the power, the strength, the severity of the staff, like it says, Matot b'nei Yisrael, Kedei, in order to transform this bitterness to sweetness, Shezuyah Tochana, that's the whole idea of the shkedim, that goes from bitter to. How do you transform sweet to bitter to sweet? How do you do it? Oh, we don't do it. It's just a natural process, right? It says, no, that's not so. Of course, it's natural, but God made the nature, and we have to use it. What's the nature? Zukukim, the tokfa shel makel. You have to have the power of a makel. Yesh lomar, we can say she'inyan a tokef, that this whole idea of power, nirmaz, is hinted at be in makel shayech kam le'inyan amihirus, quick. Shebeshaked, that in the almonds, which are quick, shema'er lahotzi perach, that it is quick, that the almond tree is very, they say, speedy to bring out flowers and fruits before any of the other trees. This is the simple meaning of Jeremiah when he says Makel Sheked. This hints at that Kodesh Baruch Hu is quick to bring the future redemption when he decides to do it. It's known, Bir Admor Azakin, that the first Rebbe of Chabad says the pasuk Vayigmal Shkedim regarding Mata Aaron. Remember, we just learned about that regarding the staff of Aaron. She says the Birkas HaKohanim, the whole why Aaron is the victory of Aaron. Remember, everyone was complaining about Aaron. We had 2 weeks ago. They were all complaining about Aaron. And Moses said, God said, tell them all to take staffs, put them in the holy temple, and we'll see 13 staffs, 12 tribes, and Aaron. And we'll see who's right. It came out the staff of Aaron grew almonds and fruits and buds. I think, why is it the victory of Aaron was shown by almonds? Aaron, because Aaron, the whole thing they were fighting over is who is a Kohen. The Kohens are the priests. Priest is not sort of a nice word. The Kohanim. The Kohanim, their whole thing, what do? Is they bring love, God's love and blessing below in the world in a fast way. Because sometimes a person deserves blessings, but they're delayed in the upper worlds for whatever reason. The person is not deserving, he did something wrong. Until it comes down below. Shari Bakali Stalshlus, in the whole order of creation, from one chamber to another, there has to be a judgment if it's proper or not. Remember, we're learning now about the different angels and the should be drawn down quickly, which is not the case if there is Aaron. Aaron brings blessings down quickly without any judgment in the worlds. He has the ability to do that. That's the whole idea of, and his sons after him, that the Kohanim, what is the whole thing? That they bring blessings quickly. That's the whole thing of the almonds, quickly. Azai then, Hashefa, who nimshechas b'mehiros, then the blessings are drawn down quickly. They're through all of the spiritual worlds, as though they come directly from God. I mean, the fact is they do come directly from God, but because they're delayed in these upper worlds, right? And upper worlds is your spiritual, whatever, your spiritual record, or sometimes just the world. There's problems with the world. There's a time where God decided not to bring blessings for the Jewish people into the world. The Kohanim bring blessings nevertheless, despite all of the considerations, negative considerations. Well, commercial, like it says, a nar, like a big river. If you have a big river that you open up the dam and it comes out powerfully, then nothing can stop the water. It'll just go with the water and it'll push away all of the obstacles, all the trees and everything that's in its way. Because we understand this, that the quickness of this almond comes from the power. That's the makel. Let's just do a little further, because I just came to an amazing understanding of something. Here, behold, you're doing it's known the words of the Shilah. Shilah is the Shnei Luchot Habrit. Rabbi Yeshaya Horowitz, that these three Torah portions, next week's Torah portion, is going to be Matat Masa, Devorim, Tamid, Cholim, and Devorim, the beginning of Deuteronomy, the week afterward. They always come in these 3 weeks. Yehu Davar B'Ito, because they're relative to the time. In these 3 weeks, we learn Matot, Masa, and Devorim. What we said before, now we can understand why. The 3 weeks of mourning are relevant to these names of these Torah portions, Matot, Masa, and Devorim. Matot is, we said, a staff, power. We can say that the whole, this, the idea of the mata, that's next week Torah portion, matot, right? Mata, this means the power and the defiance to transform something that's bad to something good. And this is hinted at the name of this Torah portion that has three topics. Number one, in Matot, there are three subjects which are discussed in the beginning of next week's Torah portion. What? Vows. After that is the war against Midian. And after that is the story of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, that they were willing to go into Israel and fight, but they didn't want a portion in the actual land of Israel. They wanted a portion outside of the land of Israel, which that's the portion the Moshiach is going to. Okay, that's these three topics. Nedarim. What do we say? There's three things discussed in next week's Torah portion, which that always falls in these 3 weeks. What are the three things? Vows, the war against Midian, and the story of Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven, that they wanted to live outside of the land of Israel, in the lands which Moshiach is going to give eventually. What are vows? Vows is known that, what is a vow? A vow, there's two opposite things said about vows. On one place it says that vows are good. They're like, it's a fence around modesty, good thing. But then Talmud Yerushalmi, it says that vows are not good. What, it's not enough for you, what the Torah said forbidden, you have to make a vow and forbid more things on yourself. So is it good or is it bad? So the answer is yes. Meduber, it's talking about two types of vows in the service of man. In the beginning of service, when a person starts to serve God, so then he has to make, nowadays we don't say vows, we say bli neder, but you can make, if you want to, you can make say a resolution. And you say without vows, but it's the same topic. In the beginning, when a person decides he wants to serve God and his nature is not to serve God, which is everybody's nature pretty much. So when you decide you want to serve God, so first of all, you have to be very careful and you have to make vows. And therefore, there has to be separation from the things of the world. That's what it says. Vows are a fence around modesty and holiness. But after you've done this, afterwards, a person goes up in his service and he wants to be happy. He wants to do things because he wants to do it. He feels the goodness, the holiness in it. Then he does holy things. Then he's doing holy things that he's able to actually refine himself and work in the world, help others in the world. Then it's the opposite. It says that vows are a very good thing. I'm sorry. Then it says that vows are not a good thing. Then you should not make vows. You should go out into the world and work with the world. The things you've already forbid yourself for, leave that, right? Leave that. But now, reach a higher level, vows are not good. They limit you from going into the world. So in the beginning, vows are good. From this, we can understand that this whole idea of vows that we're talking about next week, this is mainly, I'm talking about a person that is in the beginning or the middle of a service of God. Therefore, he has to separate himself from the world. But the ultimate ideal service of God is hafarat neder, is to relinquish all vows, to get your vows annulled by means of a father or a husband or a rabbi, whatever. Heteros nedarim, that's by means of a rabbi. That the father and the husband and the rabbi, they have the power to negate vows. That's talking about a person like this, that he already on his own, in the beginning, he needed the vows. But now, afterwards, he can elevate himself and he doesn't need to separate himself from the world. He doesn't have to worry about the effect on the world. Exactly the opposite. He wants to go out and have a positive effect on the world. That's the whole idea of next week's Torah portion that talks about making vows. Parshas Nedarim, that's the connection of Parshas Nedarim, of these vows, to next week's Torah reading, which is called matot, staffs. Hitachlit and Nedarim, the whole idea of vows and nullifying the vows is by means of giving power. A person has to use power in order to overcome these vows. Let me just say this one thing and then we'll continue. There's two more topics we want to talk about, and that is the war against Midian and also Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. Right, the war against Midian. Okay, let me just do this and then I'll tell this story. It happened to my son last night, and I just want the war in Midian. Ikar Arichos, it talks in next week's Torah portion that Moses made a war against this nation called Midian. But it doesn't talk so much about the war. It talks more about the spoils of the war that came back in very great detail. And how that afterwards they counted it, and afterwards they purified it. They had anything that touched the dead body, they had to purify it, and the vessels of Midian, and also how they divided it up, and etc. That's what it talks about next week. Okay, that's very relevant to the 3 weeks. Why? Because 1 second. Because the whole purpose of our being in this terrible exile and fighting against Midian, by the way, it says hatred, meaningless arguments, right? Suspecting everybody, hating others, anyone who doesn't agree with you. This war against this Midian is what's called Bittul Midian. The fighting against Midian was only to destroy this bad, right? Says the Rebbe, no, there was actually something more. It was not just to destroy the bad, but it was to take the spoils. Latire, hafechas amar lamatok, transforming bad to good, to take the spoils from Midian and refine them and purify them so that they can actually be a gift to God. And then the third thing that's spoken about in next week's Torah portion is the same idea of transforming bad to good. But it has to be done with, I say, power, defiance. We have to do it on our own. There's a saying that says we have to do everything on our own, and God will help us. And after we finish, we realize that we didn't do anything on our own. It was all, God did the whole business. But nevertheless, we have to do it all on our own. And pray to God for help and hope to God for help. But we have to do it on our own. We can't just sit and pray to God and ask God to do it. God put us in the world, that we should use the staff. We should use the power that we have in order to defy the world and to transform the world. I'll tell you the story in a minute. Bnei Gad u Bnei Ruvain, Chashashu, Moses, what happened? The Jewish people got to the border, and Moses said, okay, everyone go in and fight against the nations and that are there and conquer the land. And Bnei Ruvain and Bnei Gad said, listen, we have a lot of flocks. We want to stay outside of Israel. And Moses got really angry at them. What? You're not going to go in the land of Israel. That's what the whole cause we've been wandering around. And they said, no. We'll go in with everybody and we'll fight the battles. And but just when the battle's already won, you can give our portion in Israel to someone else. We want our portion outside. It says Moses worried that Achechem, your brothers are going to go into war and you're going to sit here. Hainu she'enim rutzin, that you don't want to fight with the people of Canaan. And also spiritually, that the reason that the Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain, that they wanted to remain on the other side of the Jordan, which is because it was a place of grazing. It was very fertile. It was because Bachru Liot Roetzon, they said, we want to be shepherds. Shepherds, we want to be quiet. We want to be removed from the world. Kadei, in order that they could be constantly connected to God. Moses said, that's what you want? We're gonna go into the land of Israel and conquering the land of Israel. You're thinking about your comfort and your service of the Lord, and you're not going to get involved in the world. That's what Moses suspected. Zeu Tainus Moshe. That's what Moses said. Your brothers are going to go into war. What does it mean? That the main service that a person has to do and fight with the physicality and the crassness of the world, in order to borrow, in order to refine it, and to purify it. And therefore, he said, if you do go into war, then okay, that's okay. Moses said, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what your intention. In other words, all three of these three things that are hinted at next week's Torah portion, which is called matot, which is a mat as a staff of power. They hint at that we have to use our power in order to defy and transform the world. And I'll give you an example in just a minute. That's the end of this week's Torah portion, the story about how they conquered Sichon and Og, and they built up their cities. Al Yadei Bnei Gad and Bnei Reuven. Uba'oven shel Mosavot Sham, that they dwelled over there. Sichon and Og, they were on the other side of the Jordan River, right? Not in the Israeli side. That they conquered, and then they went back there and they built up the cities. They conquered, they defeated Ogun and Sichon before they entered in Israel. The Sharim Elu Hayu Shayachim LaAvodah Zarah. It says that these cities were relevant to idolatry. Bnei Ruvain Hasavu et Shamam, and they changed their name and they made different names. They transformed the darkness to light and bitterness to sweetness. Lochi, and therefore, according we read this Torah portion, next week's Torah portion, in the 3 weeks, to tell us that the whole purpose why these terrible 3 weeks exist is to transform them from bitterness to sweetness, and to transform into good days, days of happiness and rejoicing, and a GOLA atida lavo b'mheira b'yameinu mamish, really, to transform the whole thing. And now I'll tell you the end part, what I wanted to say. Maybe this should be a separate story in itself, maybe, but I'll tell you the story anyway. My son gives lectures. My son is thank God, he's got a very unique sort of very, very, how do you say, very powerful way of looking at things, right? Very, how do you say, frontal, confrontational. So he was yesterday, somehow or other, he was invited for this panel for youth in Jerusalem. And there were a lot of not religious kids. I guess it was all for not religious kids, I guess. And there was a whole panel of, there was like 5 people on the panel. There was him, and there was a Vishnitzer Chassid. Anyway, different. So they were talking. One person stood up in the crowd, and he said, I'm a homosexual. And what's wrong with that? I'm a Jew. I used to be a rabbi, he said. I used to be a rabbi. The guy was like 25 or 30, something like that. I used to be a rabbi, and I decided I'm leaving. I'm a homosexual, and that's what's wrong with that. What's wrong? So the chassid sitting next to him said, "I'm getting out. This is terrible. This is a real, I say, desecration of God's name. That I should even be sitting here and listening to this stuff." I mean, in Judaism, there's almost no sin worse than homosexuality. I mean, idolatry is, but that's really, it's called, an abomination. It's called a toiva, and it's mentioned several times in the Torah, 3 times, whatever he's written to do. And the fact of the matter is, it's a disgusting thing. Right? I mean, think about it. Okay, anyway. So he didn't even want to think about it, didn't want anything to do with it. So meanwhile, they're talking, my son said, "Don't leave, sit here." And you should leave. I'm leaving, I'm getting out. Don't leave. You're going to see it's going to be okay. So the moderator that's standing in front, he said, "Please stop talking. We want it to stop." So this boy said, I hope I get this thing right. So the boy said, "What's wrong? What's the conversation?" So I said, my son said, the conversation between us is that this fellow, the man sitting next to me, he didn't want to stay here because he couldn't stand to listen to this, abomination that's over there. And I said that he should stay. And the person that's standing there said, "Yeah, because he's a coward. He doesn't want to face reality." And my son said, and this is the point I wanted to make. My son said, exactly the opposite. You're the one that's the coward. You're the one that's the coward. You have an urge to do something that's against the Torah. You know it's against the Torah, but you don't want to fight against it. You don't want to use any means whatsoever to defy your own urges. You're the one that's the coward. You're the one that's running away from reality. You know what's right. You know what the right thing is. But you have a big urge. I can't blame you. You have urges. God put urges into everybody. But you don't want to defy the urge. You don't want to use your power of defiance in order to do what's right, because it's just too difficult for you. You want the easy way out. And that's the whole entire problem. So the whole place was a buzz, and they didn't know what to say, and they clapped and this. And my son gave other advice, what's going on. Nowadays, basically, that's the big problem. Now we see there's this, LGBT movement and the woke movement and all these things. And basically what it is the unwillingness to defy anything for what we know is good. Now, mankind was born, every human being was born, and they know that homosexual is bad. Even themselves, they say that a person that is a straight person, they know that getting married, having children is straight. They know that they didn't come from the relationship that they want to do, from a homosexual relationship. They know that they didn't. They know that what they're doing is just for their pleasure. That's my son said. You want to live below the belt. You want to do whatever is pleasurable, the easy way. You want to take the easy way in life. You don't want to make any sort of battles whatsoever. And that's unfortunately the pervading spirit which is sweeping over America today, sweeping over the world. Easy way out. To be easy, right? To do everything. Easy way out. There's a saying, my son didn't say that, but rivers and people become crooked by taking the path of least resistance. Right? A river goes straight and meets a rock, so it goes around. It meets a tree, it goes over. It goes under. Right? It would have been straight, but because it had some sort of a obstacle, so instead of dealing with that obstacle, it goes wrong. What's the answer? Like the Rebbe said, if there's a flood, and the flood goes over all the obstacles. And we have a flood of power that we can release if we connect ourselves to the Creator, because God gave everyone the ability to stand against all the obstacles that are in the world. And there are a lot of obstacles in the world. But God gave everyone the ability to stand. I just put out a small a video that the Rebbe said that we have to say good things about bad people. Said why? The Rebbe said because bad people are only bad because God put them into a test, a situation, and He gave them power to withstand that test. But they didn't use that power to withstand it. They have it, but they didn't use that power of defiance, of transformation, of good, of courage. They didn't use those powers. They opted out for the easy way, but the powers still exist. And when you say good things about bad people, the only reason they're bad is because they made bad decisions. They didn't use the good which is inside. By you saying good things about them, is that awakens the good which is inside. And that's this idea of the staff. The staff is the inner power that every Jew has and every human being has to do what internally you know is right. And even if everybody, and the Rebbe said this, there's a speech the Rebbe gave, I think it's 1986, I think it was, that even if everybody in America, interesting, the Rebbe said back then, and it wasn't such a popular thing as it is now, right? Obama came and he transformed the whole thing. He was the one who just opened up all the gates of evil. Hatred and racism and all this, the whites are bad. But this whole thing of everybody else is the problem, not me. They're all the problem. Get rid of the other guy, right? You have a problem with your sexual identity, change your body. Your body is the problem. It's not you. Right? Everyone else is the problem. And there's not to use the inner power and fortitude and truth, which is inside of you, which is uncomfortable, in order to fight this battle. And that's what the Rebbe said, that's the whole thing of Meir Metzorim, these 3 weeks, is that it opens up the staff of the almonds. It arouses, we realize the only way out of it is that we have to use our own power and our own strength in order to do what's right. As famous saying by Nathan Hale, right, in the American Revolution, these are the times that try men's souls. To open up your soul and do what's right and defy the world. That's what's going to transform everything. Okay, now let's do the Devar Malchut. Here we go.